Greta Hoffmann stood in her kitchen, watching her son pack his rucksack. He was methodical, careful, traits he'd inherited from his father, the schoolteacher who'd taught him that precision mattered, that details saved lives. "Do you have enough socks?" she asked, knowing the question was absurd, but needing to say something, anything to fill the terrible silence. Klaus looked up, 20 years old, blonde hair cropped short, eyes the color of the Rhine in winter. "Mutter, I have 6 pairs. I'll be fine." "6 pairs for how long?" He didn't answer. They both knew the truth. No one knew how long. Hitler had been making promises. Quick victory, home by Christmas, a 1,000-year Reich that would ensure Germany never suffered again. But Greta remembered the last war, remembered her own father leaving in 1914, promising to be home for Christmas. His body had come back in 1917, 3 years late. Klaus finished packing, stood, looked at his mother with an expression caught between pride and fear. "I'll write every week," he said. "Promise me." "I promise." Lies we tell because the alternative is unthinkable. Colette Renard sat in the same kitchen where she'd raised her son, staring at the conscription notice. The paper felt obscene in her hands, bureaucratic language transforming her boy into a number, a unit, a piece in someone else's war. "Mama, it's just training," Antoine said. He was 22, dark-haired, with the quick smile of someone who'd never known real hardship. 6 months, maybe a year. Then I'll be back teaching with Papa. Colette's husband, Michel, stood by the window, watching the street. Since the declaration of war 3 days ago, Strasbourg had transformed. Soldiers everywhere, trucks, anxiety thick enough to taste. "The Germans are mobilizing," Michel said quietly. "This won't be like the last time. We're prepared now." But Colette remembered the last time too. Remembered this same kitchen in 1914, her own mother standing where she stood now, watching her brothers leave. Only one had returned, and he died of Spanish flu before 1918 ended. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said to Antoine. "I promise, Mama." The same lie, the same desperate hope. Klaus's letters had been regular at first, training in Poland, then Denmark, then the push into France, quick, victorious, exactly as promised. His last letter had come from somewhere near Strasbourg. Brief, excited. "We're winning, Mutter. It's almost over." Then silence. 3 weeks of silence. Then the telegram. "Missing in action, vicinity of Haguenau Forest. Further information pending." Greta held the telegram until her hands stopped shaking. Read it again. Again. The words didn't change. Missing. Not dead. Missing. The same cruel hope that had tortured her mother a generation ago. Antoine's letters had stopped in May. Colette had watched the Germans march into Strasbourg on June 19, 1940. Watched the swastika rise over buildings that had been French for 22 years. Watched occupations settle over her city like frost. The official notice came in July. Killed in action. Defense of Haguenau Forest. Body not recovered. Killed, not missing. Killed. But without a body, how could she believe it? How could she mourn what she couldn't see, couldn't touch, couldn't bury? She wrote to the military, to the provisional government in Vichy, to anyone who might know something. Form letters returned. Apologies. Chaos. Incomplete records. Patience. Patience. As if mothers knew how to be patient when their sons disappeared into war. Greta lived through the war in a fog of not knowing. Klaus's status never changed. Missing. The Wehrmacht sent periodic updates, still searching, records incomplete. Hope remains. Hope. That poisonous word that kept her tethered to a son who might be dead in a ditch somewhere. Might be a prisoner rotting in some camp. Might be alive and unable to contact her. She volunteered at hospitals, checked every wounded soldier's face, wrote letters to POW camps in Russia, in Britain, in America, scanned repatriation lists. Nothing. Her husband died in 1943, a stroke. But Greta knew the truth. He died of uncertainty, of a heart that couldn't bear the weight of not knowing. She continued alone. Colette lived through occupation in a different kind of fog. The Germans had taken Strasbourg, made it German again. Strasbourg, they called it. Changed street names. Forced German language in schools. Conscripted Alsatian men into the Wehrmacht to fight against France. She kept Antoine's photograph on the mantel, spoke to it every night, told him about the resistance, about the small acts of defiance, speaking French in secret, hiding neighbors who refused conscription, passing information to the underground. Michel had been arrested in 1943 for anti-German activities, deported to Dachau. He died there in 1944, though Colette wouldn't learn this until liberation. She was alone. Her son gone. Her husband gone. Only the photograph remained. And the terrible question, where? Greta read the notice in the Freiburg newspaper. Families seeking information about missing soldiers. The French Red Cross is coordinating grave registrations in Alsace. Cemetery maps available at... Her hands trembled as she cut out the notice. Alsace, where Klaus had last written from, where he'd disappeared. She was 62 years old. The war had taken everything. Her husband, her home, bombed in 1944, her country, occupied, divided, defeated. But she still had this, the need to know. She wrote to the Red Cross, received a reply 3 weeks later. Frau Hoffmann, preliminary records show a grave marker bearing the name K. Hoffmann in the Haguenau Forest Military Cemetery. We cannot confirm identity without further investigation. If you wish to visit, if she wished. She packed a bag that night. Colette saw the same notice in the Strasbourg paper, now French again. The German street signs torn down, the swastikas burned. Families of the fallen. Grave registration in Haguenau Forest underway. Information available. Haguenau Forest, where Antoine had died. She tried to visit during the war, but the Germans had forbidden it. Military zone. Access restricted. After liberation, the forest had been a minefield, literally. Too dangerous. Now, finally, they were clearing it. Mapping graves, giving the dead names again. She wrote to the Red Cross, received coordinates, a section number, a row. Madame Renard, we have located a grave marked A. Renard, French Army, June 1940. We cannot guarantee condition, but the site is accessible. She left Strasbourg on a cold November morning. Greta's journey from Freiburg to Haguenau was only 70 kilometers, but it might as well have been 700. The border was chaos. French and German officials arguing about documents, about permissions, about who had authority. The war had ended 6 months ago, but the hatred was fresh, raw, unhealed. Papers! The French border guard said in German, his accent thick with contempt. Greta handed over her travel permit. The guard examined it with exaggerated slowness. Purpose of visit? To find my son's grave. The guard looked up. His expression shifted, not to sympathy exactly, but to a kind of weary recognition. He'd heard this story before, would hear it again. Wehrmacht? Yes. He stamped her papers harder than necessary. 3 days, no more. She crossed into France, feeling like a ghost returning to the scene of her haunting. Colette's journey was shorter, 30 kilometers from Strasbourg to Haguenau, but no less difficult. The roads were still damaged, buses irregular. She walked most of the way, her feet remembering the route from before the war when she and Michel would take Antoine hiking in the forest that had killed him. She passed through villages still bearing scars, collapsed buildings, burned churches, German signs half torn down. People stared at her, an older woman walking alone with a small bag and a photograph clutched in her hand. No one stopped her. Everyone understood. They arrived at Haguenau Forest Military Cemetery on the same afternoon. The cemetery was new, established that summer by French and American forces to consolidate scattered graves. Row after row of white crosses stretched across cleared ground, the forest looming dark behind them. A Red Cross tent stood at the entrance. 2 workers, an older French woman and a young American soldier, were checking papers and providing maps. Greta approached first, handed over her documents. The French woman's expression hardened. German. Yes. Your son fought for the Wehrmacht. Yes. The woman was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something. Finally. Section C, row 7, cross marker 34. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the Americans. They insisted we register everyone. Even, she stopped herself, even the enemy. Colette arrived 10 minutes later. The same French woman greeted her differently, with recognition, with shared grief. Madame Renard, we've been expecting you. You have? Your letters. You wrote 23 times asking about your son. Colette had lost count. Where is he? Section C, row 7, cross marker 35. Row 7. The same row. They saw each other from a distance. Greta stood before a white cross marked K. Hoffmann, Wehrmacht, Juni 1940. She was kneeling, one hand on the wood, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Colette walked down row 7, counting crosses, 33, 34, 35. A. Renard, Armée Française, Juin 1940, right next to the German cross, right next to the woman in black. Colette stopped, stared. The woman, elderly, thin, dressed in mourning, looked up. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Greta spoke in careful, accented French. Your son? Colette nodded, unable to speak. Mine too. Greta gestured to the cross beside her. Colette looked, read the name. Wehrmacht, June 1940. The same battle, the same forest, the same week her son had died. Maybe the same day, maybe, and this thought arrived like a knife, killed by each other. They stood in silence, 2 mothers at adjacent graves, the air between them thick with 5 years of war, occupation, loss, and the terrible possibility that their sons had killed each other. Finally, Colette found her voice. How did he die? Greta shook her head. I don't know. The letter said missing. I only found out there was a grave last month. You? Killed in action. That's all they told me. Defending the forest. More silence. He was 20, Greta said. Just turned 20 in April. Mine was 22. Was he conscripted? Yes. You? Enlisted. He believed. Greta stopped. What did it matter what Klaus believed? He was dead. Belief had saved no one. Colette knelt before her son's cross, placed flowers she'd brought, late autumn asters, half frozen but still alive. Greta watched. Then, slowly, she stood and moved to her bag. Withdrew her own flowers, dried roses from her garden in Freiburg, saved and pressed. She placed them on Klaus's grave, then hesitated. Colette was watching her. May I? Greta asked, holding a single rose. Colette understood, nodded. Greta placed the German rose on the French grave. Colette stood, took one of her asters, placed it on the German grave. They stepped back, looked at the 2 crosses, side by side. Flowers mixed together. The distinction between enemy and ally momentarily erased by the simple fact of motherhood. They were so young, Colette whispered. Too young. Do you think they... Colette couldn't finish. Killed each other? Greta's voice was steady. I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter now? Doesn't it? Greta looked at the graves. They're both dead. Both here. Both... Her voice broke. Both gone. That's what matters. That's all that matters. Colette felt something crack inside her chest. 5 years of hatred, of Germans, of occupation, of the enemy who'd taken everything, suddenly confronted with this. A German mother who'd lost exactly what she'd lost. I'm sorry, Colette said. Greta looked at her, confused. For what? For your son, for your loss. Greta's eyes filled. And I for yours. They stood together as the afternoon light faded. 2 mothers from opposite sides of history's cruelest divide, united by the only thing stronger than nationalism or war or 5 years of propaganda. The love of a mother for her child, and the unbearable weight of that love's ending. Neither woman left the cemetery that evening. The Red Cross workers had gone home. The November cold settled over the forest like a shroud. But Greta and Colette remained, unwilling or unable to leave their sons alone in the dark. They sat on the ground between the two graves, backs against the crosses, wrapped in thin blankets. "Tell me about him," Colette said into the darkness. "What? Your son, Klaus? Tell me who he was." Greta was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He wanted to be a teacher, like his father. He loved mathematics, could solve equations in his head that I needed paper for. He collected stamps, had a book full of them from all over the world." She paused. "He hated the war, but he went anyway because he thought it was his duty." Colette listened, heard echoes of her own son. "Antoine wanted to teach too," she said. "Literature. He'd quote Rimbaud and Hugo at the dinner table until his father begged him to stop." She smiled at the memory, then felt the smile die. "He didn't want to fight, but when the conscription came, he said someone had to defend France." "They were the same," Greta whispered. "Yes." More silence. Comfortable now. Shared. "Do you know what happened?" Colette asked. "In the battle. What they told you?" Greta shook her head. "Nothing. Just missing in action, Haguenau Forest. I found a soldier later, someone from Klaus's unit. He said there was an ambush, June 14th, French positions hidden in the trees. Half his company died in the first hour. He didn't remember Klaus specifically, just chaos. Screaming, trees exploding, then retreat. June 14th. Colette felt ice form in her chest. "That was the day," she whispered. "What?" "June 14th. That was the day Antoine died. His commanding officer wrote to me, years later, after liberation. He said they'd held a position in the forest. Germans had attacked at dawn. They fought for hours. Antoine was hit covering a retreat. The implications settled between them like stones. Same day, same battle, same forest. Maybe the same moment." "Oh, God," Greta breathed. "Maybe Klaus." Colette couldn't finish. "Maybe Antoine." Neither could Greta. They sat in the dark. Two mothers confronting the possibility that their sons had killed each other. That Klaus's bullet had torn through Antoine's chest, or Antoine's had shattered Klaus's skull. That the boys who'd both wanted to teach, who'd both loved their mothers, who'd both been 20 years old and terrified, had ended each other in a forest neither had chosen to fight in. "I don't want to know," Colette said finally. "Neither do I. Does it change anything? If we knew for certain?" Greta thought. "No, it changes nothing. They're still dead. We're still here. The knowing wouldn't bring them back. But the not knowing..." "The not knowing is mercy. Sometimes mercy is all we get." They spent the night at the cemetery, taking turns keeping watch. Though for what, neither could say. Keeping vigil, perhaps. Refusing to let their sons be alone. At dawn, Colette produced bread and cheese from her bag. They ate in silence, watching the sun rise over the forest that had taken everything. "What will you do now?" Greta asked. "Go home. Try to live. You?" "The same. Will you come back? To visit?" Greta looked at Klaus's grave. "If they let me. The French don't like Germans visiting." "I'll write to them," Colette said impulsively. "I'll tell them you have a right, that your son is buried here too." "You do that?" "Your son died too. You deserve to mourn him." Greta's eyes filled. "Thank you." They sat together a while longer. Then Colette stood, brushed dirt from her coat. "I should go. I have a long walk back." Greta stood too. They faced each other. Two women who a week ago would have been enemies by circumstance. Now something else entirely. "Will I see you again?" Greta asked. Colette hesitated. Then, "Next year. Same day. November 15th. I'll come back." "So will I." They embraced. Awkwardly at first, then tighter. Two mothers holding each other up because no one else could understand this specific weight, this specific loss. When they parted, both were crying. "For Klaus," Colette said, placing her hand on the German cross. "For Antoine," Greta replied, touching the French cross. Then they walked away in opposite directions. leaving their sons side by side in the forest where war had tried and failed to make them enemies. Greta arrived first. The cemetery had changed. More organized now. Permanent markers replacing some wooden crosses. Paths cleared and maintained. The French had decided to keep it, a memorial to the fallen of 1940, both sides. She found row 7. Klaus's cross was still there, weathered but standing. Someone had placed flowers recently, fresh ones. She knelt, placed her own, dried roses again, the only thing that survived German winters. "I'm back, mein Sohn," she whispered, like I promised. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Colette stood there, older somehow, thinner, but alive. She carried a small bouquet of chrysanthemums. "You came," Colette said. "I promised." They embraced like old friends. They spent the day together, tending both graves, sharing stories. Colette told Greta about Strasbourg slowly returning to normal. French again, the occupation's scars fading but visible. About the trials of collaborators. About neighbors who denounced each other. About the ugly aftermath of liberation. Greta told Colette about Germany's collapse. The occupation zones. The hunger. The shame. The struggle to understand how her country had become what it became. "Do you hate us?" Greta asked. "For what we did? For the war? For everything?" Colette was quiet. Then, "I hate what happened. I hate the war. I hate the men who started it. But you?" She looked at Greta. "You lost as much as I did. How can I hate someone who grieves the same way I grieve?" "Many do. Many are afraid. Afraid that if they stop hating, they'll have to confront the fact that we're the same. That our sons were the same. That none of this had to happen." Did it have to happen? The war? No. Wars never have to happen. But men convince themselves they do. And then mothers bury their sons. They made it tradition. Every year. November 15th. No matter the weather, the distance, the difficulty. 1947. They brought photographs. Showed each other what Klaus and Antoine had looked like in life. Found eerie similarities. Both young, both smiling in their photos, both trying to look brave. 1948. Greta brought Klaus's stamp collection. Colette brought Antoine's favorite book of Rimbaud poetry. They buried small pieces at each grave, connecting the boys to what they'd loved. 1949. They didn't speak much. Just sat together in comfortable silence. The grief had changed shape. No longer the sharp agony of early loss, but a dull, permanent ache. 1950. The cemetery officially opened as a memorial. Dignitaries came. Speeches about sacrifice and honor and never forgetting. Greta and Colette skipped the ceremony, visited at dawn before the crowds arrived. 1955. 10 years. They were both elderly now, moving slowly, joints protesting. But they came. Always came. 1960. 20 years. Greta brought her granddaughter, Klaus's niece, born after the war, named Clara, in his memory. Colette had no grandchildren. Antoine's line had ended with him. "Tell her about your uncle," Colette said to young Clara. The girl, 10 years old, looked at the grave. "Grossmutter says he was kind, that he hated fighting." "He was," Colette confirmed. "My son was too. They would have been friends, I think, in another world." They were both in their 80s now. Greta's hands shook with palsy. Colette walked with a cane, but they came. A journalist found them there, young, French, writing a piece about the 25th anniversary of the 1940 campaign. "Excuse me," he said. "May I ask why you're here?" "Our sons," Colette said simply. The journalist looked at the crosses, saw the names, German and French, side by side. Both of you are mothers of the fallen?" "Yes, but..." He gestured at the German cross. She's my friend," Colette said firmly. "Her son died the same day mine did, in the same battle. They're buried together, so we mourn together." The journalist wrote that down. That's remarkable. After everything, the occupation, the war, you can forgive? Colette looked at Greta, back at the journalist. Forgiveness isn't the word, she said. We didn't wrong each other. Our governments did. Our armies did. We're just two mothers who lost everything. There's nothing to forgive between us. Then what is it? Greta spoke, her accent still thick after 25 years. Understanding. She understands what I lost because she lost the same thing. We're the same. We always were. The war tried to make us enemies. We refused. The journalist published their story. Letters poured in, some supportive, some angry. How dare a Frenchwoman befriend a German? How dare a German claim equality of suffering? They ignored it all. They came back the next year. And the next. And the next. Colette came alone. She placed flowers on both graves, chrysanthemums for Antoine, roses for Klaus. Stood in silence, leaning heavily on her cane. Greta had died that summer. Peacefully, in her sleep. 87 years old. She'd made Colette promise to keep coming. To visit Klaus's grave along with Antoine's. To remember both boys. Colette kept her promise. I'm here, Greta, she said to the empty air. I brought your roses. She stayed until sunset, talking to ghosts. 2 sons and 1 friend who'd understood. Colette was 90 years old, too frail to travel alone. But Clara came, Greta's granddaughter, now a woman of 35 with children of her own. She'd been coming every year since Greta died, honoring her grandmother's tradition. Honoring the strange, beautiful friendship between 2 women who should have been enemies. Clara helped Colette to the graves. They placed flowers together. Tell me again, Colette said, about Klaus, what your grandmother told you. Clara smiled. He wanted to be a teacher. He loved stamps. He was kind and gentle and hated violence. Like Antoine. Yes. Grossmother always said they would have been friends. They are now, Colette said. Together. Finally, at peace. Colette died in October, 2 weeks before the anniversary. Clara came anyway. Brought flowers for all 3. Antoine, Klaus, and now Colette, buried in Strasbourg but memorialized here in spirit. She brought her own daughter, 14 years old. 3rd generation removed from the war but carrying its memory. Why do we come here? The girl asked. They're just graves. Clara knelt, placed flowers on both crosses. Because your great-great-uncle Klaus died here, and because his grave saved his mother's life. I don't understand. Your great-great-grandmother lost everything in the war. Her son, her husband, her country. She could have drowned in hate. Instead, she found Colette, found someone who understood. And that understanding saved both of them. The French woman. Yes, they were supposed to be enemies, but they chose to be friends. They chose to remember together instead of hating alone. The girl looked at the crosses. That's why we come? To remember? To remember that hate is a choice. And so is love. The cemetery is a protected memorial now, maintained by the European Union as a symbol of reconciliation. A plaque at the entrance tells the story of Greta Hoffmann and Colette Renard, 2 mothers from opposite sides who met at their sons' graves and chose friendship over enmity. A young woman stands before the 2 crosses. She's German, but lives in France. Her name is Sophie. She's Clara's great-granddaughter, Klaus's great-great-great-niece. She's brought someone with her, a young French man named Marc. He's Colette's great-great-nephew, Antoine's brother's grandson's son, the family line that survived. They're engaged to be married. They place flowers together. Roses and chrysanthemums, mixed, indistinguishable. My great-great-aunt Colette came here every year for 38 years, Marc says. My great-great-great-grandmother Greta came for 25, Sophie replies. To remember the war? To remember that love is stronger than war. They stand together, holding hands. 2 young people building a future on the foundation their ancestors laid. a foundation of understanding, of forgiveness, of the radical choice to see humanity in the enemy. They're why we can be together, Sophie says.
Yes, because they refuse to hate.
Because they chose each other. Across every line that should have divided them. Around them, the forest is quiet. The graves stand in neat rows, thousands of them, each marking a life ended too soon. But these two, row 7, crosses 34 and 35, are different. These two are together, not enemies, not even just allies. Brothers, finally. United by the mothers who refused to let war have the last word.